Oh, blast. Horst.
What?
Can you get the e-liquid out of the side of the backpack?
No.
Damn it. Hello. I'm late, but then again, I dare say you wouldn't expect me early, so... Who am I? Horst?
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about... Alright, I'm not worrying then.
Good.
I don't think the mic can pick that up, but Horst is making a lot of noises in the next room. Thank you.
I'm having a show. I'm doing great.
He's doing great. Yeah, I was like running on empty. I was like, gonna just, I'm at Horst.
Feed your addiction.
Well, you know, it's the one vice I can't be hanged for, so I'm going to...
It's true. It's true. One of your least
Although,
sinful sins.
Sorry, we were eating in the next room, and,
You were eating.
Okay, you were also. We were both. No. Well, I was eating and Horst was sitting next to me and being insufferable about it.
You know, saying I'm great company isn't that hard.
Yeah, but the obvious necessity would be that you would have to be great company, which...
You hurt me. You hurt me deep.
I drank water, not recently, but yes. Thank you for your concern. How are you all? How is everybody? Oh, yeah, Horst is here.
Huh?
Everyone's commenting on your presence.
Hello. I'm going to go get something important for you.
Get something important for me. No,
Again.
I don't think so.
Present.
Whatever it is, I'm sure I don't need it. I have all the necessities right here on the side table. It's fine. Unless they're my cufflinks, it's fine. I rolled the sleeves up. Don't worry about it. We're all gonna be fine. I'm sure it's not that big of a deal, whatever he's got. Hello, Dad. I'm at Horst this evening, so the obvious implication is that I know most of you show up, namely, just for Denki's rant, which will not happen tonight because Denki isn't here. Oh, it's water.
Sure.
It's water. What does this say? What does this say? Okay.
Drink up.
What did you put in here?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It looks like water. It smells like water.
Does it taste like water?
I'm testing this. Hold on. It's water.
Yeah, I didn't
Hopefully
do anything.
unpoisoned water.
Yeah, I didn't do anything. I just wanted to see you squirm for a little bit.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
There's still people looking at you? I could barely look at you for 5 seconds.
Horst, if you're going to interrupt every 5 to 10 seconds, you can go ahead and see yourself out now. Horst is being a nuisance again.
I thought you were about to say
Big
abusive,
surprise.
but I was about to be rude. I'm just curious. I'm just reading. Oh, look at you. You have fans.
Are you going to hover here the entire night?
Yes.
damn it.
I'm here to keep you company since no one else is.
He's so supportive.
Mm-hmm. I'm here for you.
Sure.
I'm sure they enjoy my commentary right now.
Oof. No. He's predisposed. He's doing something else.
What?
Nothing. Anyway, so all of you who show up for Denki's rant are unfortunately going to be disappointed. He will not be doing so this evening. And you will have to just join us next week for Denki's rant on Chernobyl cave divers. Comments, concerns, questions? Yes, Horst? Problem?
No problem at all. That just really hit me.
Tourism in Chernobyl is a serious issue. Anyway.
I'm sure.
Survive? Well, he did so once. Can I give you an overview so far of what has happened thus far? In this case, nothing of note. In the book, Herr Zork is suspected of hanging me out of an aeroship. Unfortunately, he gets arrested, and once we find out that it was in fact not Herr Zork and could not have been, or at least speculate that it could not have been, we go to retrieve him, and he's killed himself. Which is a waste. But all the same, that still leaves the mystery of Daguerre's death. And I devise a plan to get through Senza without being arrested. Which will happen this week.
Look at you go.
Thank you. And redacted later? Potentially. Or it might just happen next week. I'm not sure. We haven't decided. We were busy today, so unfortunately I did not get home before this scheduled appearance, and I didn't want to be late, so I just decided I would stay here with Horst.
And look, you have some great company now.
You keep using the phrase "great company," and I'm not sure
that's what this is. I've been told I'm great company by many people.
Oh, I'm sure. Lacrosse team. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I had to bring that up.
See, he's different in this state. He doesn't feel shame. I have many. Yes. Many in this room, in fact. Anyway, how are you all? Hopefully you're doing well. Still alive, I hope. Sorry it's so barren in here. My brother isn't much of a decorator.
Hey, listen, less is more.
Neither am I, but mostly alive.
You're in the one barren area,
Alive-ish.
and you're out here saying I have no taste.
Alive might be an overstatement. Oh, I believe I did catch a glimpse of it while I was doing things earlier. I pop in and out of the Discord and I notice things, but I don't always have the time to comment. But if it's the Vash, was it the Vash? Because that looked awesome. Thank you. I appreciate the roses. Lucifer is alive. Good. If anything happens to that cat, we're all doomed.
There's a cat.
Yes, that.
There's a cat.
Not on the live currently. There is a cat in the place where we discuss things. Yeah, I like that one. I did see that. Are you chugging it?
Do you want me drinking it while you're reading?
You can. That wasn't... I drink while I'm reading.
Oh. Well then yes, I'm chugging.
God.
I thought I had this for a reading, but no.
He's
Cheers.
making rules where there are none.
Cheers.
And being frightfully rude in every other regard. What?
Cheers.
But yeah, the tattoo was really great looking. I do think that's good work. I know. He's making up rules where there are none for no apparent reason.
Who said that?
What?
Who said that?
I did, a minute ago. Which you weren't paying attention to, obviously.
Yeah, I've been busy.
What is wrong with that straw? What is wrong with it? What's on it? What's in it?
There are little aliens on it.
Oh, good God. Okay. Oh, yeah, Walmart is a horrible trash fire and a scourge upon humanity.
I found a really good sweater there.
What?
I found some really cool stuff at Walmart.
Of course you have. Anyway, no, there was some issues at a Walmart in reasons past. There was a very aggressive altercation in the energy drink aisle. It prevented Denki from doing anything, and they were very upset. And they ranted about it one day. That's how the rant started. So they came on the live, ranted about a fight in a Walmart for about 20 minutes.
Sounds about right.
Oh, yeah, someone didn't have any bitches. It was terrible.
I love them.
Oh, yeah, they were... And it was not planned. They were just walking past and happened to hear me say that we got held up at the Walmart. And they were like, "Are you telling the Walmart story?" And I was like, "No, I wasn't really. I was just saying that we were delayed." And they were like, "I'll tell the Walmart story." And then they came in and took over for 15, 20 minutes. It was fantastic, actually. They're much more entertaining than I am. Although, then again, it's not in my job description to be entertaining.
It does help.
For you, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, does anyone want me to read them a story, or are we all just going to talk shit all night? Because I know that's what Horst would prefer, but this isn't Horst live. Is it?
The second you get
Horst?
up. The second you get up, I'm taking over.
Well, I don't plan on getting up, so I suppose if you sit on my lap, I will stake you myself. He looked down at me as though he was just about to sit down here.
I'd rather take a morning stroll.
Well, you know, that's an option.
I'm sure you would love that.
That was always allowed. Okay. Well, it's night, and I'm sure we won't be here till morning, so I guess you'll just have to wait and see until then. But the live, most certainly, he'll still be here. He doesn't have the guts to do away with himself any other way.
No, it's the most interesting way to go.
The most interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you would know the feeling. But I've been informed that it is a very strange feeling to be turned into ash.
I thought, okay. Yeah, sure. That's what you meant. Got it. Okay. Anyway, we're going to read a book now, and Horst is going to sit quietly. Aren't you, Horst?
Pretend like I don't exist, yes.
Yes, it is. Anyway, we're starting chapter 11 now. If You need a recap. You missed it. I'm not redoing it. You'll just have to figure it out. For everybody who doesn't know what we're doing here and has just dropped in out of the blue in the middle of Book 2, what are you like? Obviously you didn't see the title, and you are in the wrong place at the wrong time if you don't have any clue what's going on. Anyway, I've been reading a book. I've read all of Book 1. We're more than halfway through Book 2, and if you don't understand what's happening, you can click the link and go to the YouTube in my bio and listen to the complete entirety of Book 1 before you come back here and show your face. And we'll all welcome you graciously then. And mods, if you can, you've been doing a great job of telling everybody who drops in what the fuck is going on halfway through, in case they get really confused and decide to drop in for no reason. Perhaps they thought this was a Bungo Stray Dogs podcast or something, I don't know, but it's not. Are you okay, Horst? Horst is having an episode. I don't know if you can pick it up on the mic.
Never called it that.
What? Never called what? An episode? You don't want me to call it that?
All I'm imagining now is the Johannes Bungo Stray Dogs crossover that should never exist.
I mean, I never said I approved of it. I'm just saying if people wander in here as though they didn't notice the title and decided that it was the place they needed to be at that particular moment, you're in the wrong place. Go catch up with us. And mods, if you could enlighten everyone who decides to drop in. Excellent. Anyway, and we're on chapter 11, if I didn't mention that. And we're going to go ahead and start now.
By the way, I got a cat. Hi, Alice.
Alice is here. Sorry, that startled me. I didn't know she was down here. Hello, Alice.
Oh, princess.
Alice.
Would you like a princess?
We're going to start, I promise. Sorry, there was a cat.
Oh, I'm going to join you. See?
Everybody say hi to Alice before we start. Good cat. All right. Is everyone ready? Everybody got your drinks, go to the bathroom, eat your dinner, whatever you have.
Sure, you don't have to go to the bathroom. I could keep them company.
No, you're not sitting in this chair. The minute I leave... Anyway, I'm never getting this chair back. I have to sit here the entire time.
You go home with it.
Excellent, 2. All right. Chapter 11, in which Cabal behaves despicably and inquisitively. Cabal, for his part, knew exactly what he was going to tell the Sensen authorities. The Princess Hortense's entry into the skies of Senzo was marked by the appearance of a flight of military entomopters. As the passengers gathered in the salon to watch the machines zoom by in a whirl of metallic wings, Captain Sten was at pains to announce that the aircraft were there as an honor guard come to escort them in style to Perilla Airport in the long promontory of land that split Markarvia and Catamenia. Nobody believed it for a second. They all knew, or were told quickly enough by their fellows, that the escort was there to keep an eye on them. Nobody said what would happen if the aeroship deviated on its approach path to Perilla, but nobody needed to. The guns and rockets the entomopters carried were not there simply for show. Perhaps oddly it was the fact that the pilots did not return the waves of the passengers, but remained grim and cold, that caused a greater sense of foreboding than all the weaponry. Bloody Sensens, sniffed Casson, making one of his occasional but always unpopular appearances. Wouldn't kill him to crack a smile now and then. That this was the most rank hypocrisy coming from a man for whom cracking a smile himself would probably prove fatal was silently noted by the listeners. None, however, commented on it. That would have meant possibly provoking a conversation with him, and this was too great a price to pay. The captain's description of the fighter aircraft as an honor guard was therefore believed by no one, nor was his additional announcement that there would be a stopover of a full day at Perilla to allow the passengers to stretch their legs a little and take in the sights. In reality, all knew that citizen officials would be going through the ship's every nook and cranny in search of possible military supplies intended for Catamenia. On this particular occasion, it would mean searching the tons of food supplies intended for disaster relief, which could only prolong the search process. There are only so many bags of potatoes that can be bayoneted in a working day. The final approach to the mooring cradle was slow but sure, the tone of the maneuver being no sudden moves writ large. The fighter aircraft had stacked into a formation high and astern of the Hortense, all the better to stoop down and strafe her into wreckage if she did anything the squadron leader considered suspicious or threatening. Captain Sten intended to provide no such excuse, and was clearly signaling every turn and alteration in speed right down into the cradle itself. It was not just the relief of completing the difficult landing that caused the passengers, and it was reasonable to assume the crew, to sigh, but also the lifting of the threat of machine gun bullets and rocket explosions. Cabal stood at one of the long salon windows. He had watched the approach with a lively interest, specifically the arrangement of the aeroport itself. Around the field stood a high wire fence, and without that a ditch or possibly an overgrown ha-ha. Alongside the wire ran a long strip of carefully maintained tarmacadam. Near the end there were two hangars. One seemed to be for civilian aircraft, but the other was partitioned off by another fence and gates, and was presumably the hangar from which the military ran its aerial patrols. Between the runway and the two aeroship cradles, the other standing empty, was a clean, green swath of short-cut grass, perhaps 300 meters wide. The cradles stood much closer to the airport buildings than the hangars, and it was clear that entomopters were the lesser part of the facility's traffic, in status, if not quantity. It all seemed very efficient, rather too efficient for Cabal's liking. To be sure, he had a plan A to get him out of the aeroport, away and clear before anybody was any the wiser about the truth of Herr Meisner. He didn't like the plan much, though. It involved close dealings with the citizen authorities, and if they failed to react the way he'd predicted, they need only reach out to arrest him. He had hoped for a less complex Plan B to present itself, something along the lines of sneaking through the airport's perimeter under cover of darkness. But the high fences and the military presence had snuffed out that hope. There was no chance then. Plan A, with all its attendant opportunities for unwanted complication, was his only option. Filled with conflicting emotions, none of them pleasant, he retired to his cabin to prepare. Even after the ship had settled into the cradle, the etheric line guides had disengaged. The gyroscopic levitators had been allowed to wind down to a halt, and the passenger ramp had been lowered. Nobody was allowed to disembark. Instead, there was a long and humiliating wait while Sens and Customs made ready. The passengers hung around in the salon, impatient but speaking little. Only Leonie Barrow was actually scheduled to leave the journey here, but everybody wanted to stretch their legs and see a little of Perilla, a city noted for its history, art, and architecture throughout the civilized world. Even the most fervent Markarvian patriot would not like to be regarded as a barbarian, though most were, and so they were prepared to wander the streets, guidebook in hand, and pretend that they appreciated what they saw. It was necessary for Herr Meisner to lead the crowd, however, and he couldn't do that via the salon. Instead, he took advantage of the crew hatch down through the dining room and found himself on the top of a steel spiral staircase leading down one of the support stanchions, the very cousin of the one by which he had first boarded the Princess Hortense at Emperor Boniface VIII Aeroport in Krenz. He was thankful that they all seemed to be built to a standard pattern. The alternative might have involved him dangling from the aeroship's underside by his fingertips, and he'd done quite enough of that for one voyage. He descended quickly, carrying no luggage but for his case and his cane. Meisners could stay aboard the Hortense and be divided amongst the crew by lots as far as he was concerned. He was almost done with the petty civil servant whose persona he had been forced to estimate and assume. He had met the real Meisner only briefly, and had not sufficient time on that occasion to properly foment a real dislike for the man. He had, however, by a combination of going through Meisner's luggage, personal effects, and work papers, got his measure, and could not wait to shrug the lowly and loathly civil servant from him as a serpent might slough off a particularly irritating skin. God, feels like something stuck in my throat. His progress was noted and acted upon by the Senzins, which was fine and predicted, and so he was unsurprised to be met a few meters from the base of the steps by a small cortege of serious and unconcerned customs officers. Their leader made as if to say something officious and obvious, but Cabal preempted him with an impatient wag of his finger. "Not here," he snapped at the surprised officer. "Not now." He moved through them with such a sense of purpose, intent, that the customs men found themselves falling into twin columns as he headed for the main aeroport buildings, the cortege becoming an entourage. Upon arrival at the customs shed, he glared significantly at the junior officers until they wilted. Taking the hint, their senior dismissed them with a wave as if shooing off flies. Once again, the officer drew breath to demand of Cabal an explanation, and once again Cabal preempted him. He drew a long white envelope from an inner pocket quickly enough to make a small crack like a tiny whip. The customs man looked at it curiously and raised his eyebrows when he saw the Mercarvian state seal and red wax on the flap. Cabal ran his thumb under it and broke the wax before the officer had a chance to see that it was a low-priority variant of the seal, such as a docket clerk, first class, might carry with him. "I was given this when I embarked upon the Princess Hortense," Cabal told the officer in a conspiratorial tone. "You will understand that there are politics at play, even within my government, factions and such like. One of these has taken to dabbling with certain procedures that are not acceptable to civilized persons, no matter what their nationality." He took the two folded sheets of paper from the envelope that he had placed there less than an hour before and passed them over. If the customs officer had been startled by events so far, that was as nothing to his expression when he read the first paragraph of the letter. He looked up from the letter and stared at Cabal with wide eyes. "A necromancer?" he said, nearly in a whisper. "Indeed so," confirmed Cabal. "Read on, read on." The officer did so, and his discomfort increased with every line. "This is dreadful," he said when he had finished, this time in a definite whisper. Cabal hoped and trusted that he was referring to the document's content and not the fact that it was a forgery. "Yes, it is. I am ashamed that I have to turn to you for help instead of concluding this affair in Mercarvia. The people who first employed this monster made that impossible. This is my last chance to prevent their plan reaching fruition." The customs officer was out of his depth. He kept reading the document, or at least one part of it. Cabal suspected it was the phrases "mass resurrection" and "army of the dead" that had fixed his attention so admirably, which was gratifying, as that was exactly the reason he had included them. The vision they provoked was of the victims of catamenium famine being so ill-bred as not only to be catamenium and dead, but brain-eating catamenian zombies stumbling over the border into Senza to suck the cerebellums of the Senzan citizenry, all under the domination of a mercenary necromancer backed by Mercarvian money. To an officer whose usual workaday routine consisted of saying "anything to declare" repeatedly, it was all a bit much to grasp. Cabal allowed him another few seconds of grasping time, then said, "You have to inform your superiors immediately. This plot has to be exposed and stopped, for the sake of your people and for the very soul of mine. Do you understand how important this is?" "But who?" asked the customs officer, almost pleading. "Who should I go to?" This foxed Cabal for a second. He'd expected the Senzan customs to be rather more thorough in its preparedness for the ghastly plots of its neighbors. You're going to be overseeing the search of the Princess Hortense, are you not? The customs man shook his head. No, the military handles that. We always expect trouble from those Mercarvian vessels, so the military is used to discourage anything, a bit dodgy. The military, of course. Then take this report to the officer of the watch at the military hangar immediately. Now! Time is wasting. The customs man took a couple of uncertain steps toward the door and then stopped, dithering. Cabal allowed a little of his impatience to boil over. It was a realistic reaction under the circumstances, and besides, it made him feel better. What in heaven's name is it? Would you come with me? Asked the customs officer. Please? The customs and the military did not always see eye to eye, and it would help his case to have an actual Mercarvian agent with him when he tried to explain to a hard-boiled wing commander that the Catamenians and an element of the Mercarvian elite were planning a mass illegal immigration of undead cannibals on Descenza. Come with... Impossible! I have to get back to the aeroship before I'm missed. A happy bit of invention occurred to him, and he added, They've already murdered 2 other agents during this trip. I don't want them to make it 3. You understand me? The officer didn't. Not really, but the mention of murder raised the tide of responsibility past his chin and up to his nose. He was desperate to pass it on to somebody senior to himself, who might actually know what to do with this information. Ideally, somebody in the military. Then, if they messed up and Senza was overrun by voracious zombies, he would be in the delightful position of being able to mutter, Typical bloody military, can't get anything right, shortly before ingestion. So after the mysterious man from Mercarvia had gone out of the exit and was presumably sneaking back aboard the Princess Hortense, the customs officer girded his loins and set off for the military compound. A minute after he left, the mysterious man from Mercarvia stealthily re-entered the customs shed and, discovering it to be as empty as he had hoped, became nonchalant and strolled out through the arrivals hall. Finally, after the wait had exceeded calculated rudeness and was now simply boring, the Senzens deigned to board the Princess Hortense. Captain Sten was disturbed to note that instead of it being primarily a customs operation backed up by the military, only troops boarded and took up positions with their rifles unshouldered and at the ready. A lieutenant marched up to Sten and saluted crisply. Sten returned the salute more slowly, frowning at the unexpectedly threatening presence. "Why do these men have their weapons ready, Lieutenant?" he asked quietly enough to avoid being overheard by the passengers who were present. The lieutenant drew a couple of sheets of paper from his peacock green jacket and held them up so that Sten could read the first. Sten saw the heading and demanded, "Where did you get this? This is an official Mercarvian document." The lieutenant was unimpressed. "Read it, sir," he said with the carefully controlled inflection of a junior officer who has authority over a senior officer on a different chain of command, a sterile sort of respect. Holding his anger in with a grimace, Sten read on. A few lines in, his anger turned to astonishment. "That's impossible. I don't believe it. I can't believe it. I refuse to believe it." The lieutenant was enjoying himself, albeit inwardly. He folded the sheets and replaced them. "Then you don't believe your own government, Captain? As you said, this is an official Mercarvian document." He turned to a soldier who was reading a copy of the ship's manifest. "Sergeant, have you found the suspect yet?" "Just about, sir." He looked around the salon and asked the captain, "Are these all your passengers, sir?" "Yes," snapped Sten. "You can see for yourself." "Oh, actually, no. We're a couple short. I was meaning to speak to..." "We know about the deaths, Captain," said the lieutenant. He took the manifest and the passenger list from the sergeant and looked around, matching names to likely faces, ignoring Sten's thunderstruck expression. He walked slowly through the passengers who were uncertain what was going on, but certain that something was going on, and moved slightly away from the lieutenant, as if he had a contagious disease or was about to rope them into a party game. He stopped. You are Signor Casson, no? It was not. It was Signor Harleman, who was visibly relieved that he wasn't. He pointed out Casson, who in turn shriveled up a little beneath the lieutenant's cold stare. The lieutenant slowly walked towards him, but paused halfway there to check his list again. He turned to his right and looked at Lady Ninica. You are Signorina Barrow? Ninica didn't get a chance to answer, as an outraged Miss Ambersley flustered in front of her like a combative chicken. She most certainly is not, young man, her ladyship's attendant said in her severest tone. This is the Lady Ophelia Ninica, and I shall thank you to show her the proper respect. That, she nodded at Leonie Barrow, is Miss Barrow. The lieutenant looked over at her with mild interest. For her part, Miss Barrow was wondering what all this head-counting was in aid of. She was wondering how the Senzans had learned of the death aboard, especially as it was evident that the captain clearly hadn't been the one to tell them. Perhaps Cabal had been right in his belief that there were agents aboard, just not Mercarvian ones. And, speaking of Cabal, where was he? It struck her that she hadn't seen him since the approach to the airport. Signorina Barrow? asked the lieutenant. She said, thinking hard. Perhaps this wasn't about the mysterious happenings aboard at all. Perhaps this was all about Cabal. Yes, I'm Leonie Barrow. Splendido, said the lieutenant, and he snapped his fingers and lazily pointed at her. At the sound, his soldiers snapped to attention. At the gesture, Miss Barrow found herself ringed by 6 rifles. What? She fought an impulse to jump with surprise, as the rational part of her feared, with reasonable grounds, that the soldiers might regard that as an excuse to fire. This left her up on the balls of her feet, from which she slowly descended back onto her heels in an effort to appear unthreatening. I still don't believe it, rumbled Captain Sten. What is the meaning of this? Miss Ambersley was even more aflutter now than she had been moments ago. You can't point your horrid guns at her. She's English. The lieutenant ignored her. He marched up to Miss Barrow and took a moment to curl his lip and sneer at her properly, so that she was in no doubt at all that she was being sneered at. Signorina Leonie Barrow, he said the latter words as though they were patent and obvious lies. Or should I say, he let the seconds linger, taking pleasure in the tension, knowing his civilian onlookers, poor ignorant fools that they were craning forward, hanging on his words. He let them squirm for a moment longer, and then delivered the denouement. Johanna Cabal, necromancer. There was a collective gasp, including one from the freshly unmasked necromantrix. You have got this so wrong, she managed to say evenly. He was aware that he could not push the sneer any further without its looking plain silly, so he waggled his head a little for emphasis and said instead, Oh, have I indeed? We shall see. You are under arrest for crimes against humanity, nature, and God, specifically the prescribed practice of necromancy. You do not have to say anything, but anything you do say will be taken down in evidence and may be used at trial. You have the right to legal counsel during questioning and during any subsequent trial. Do you understand these rights? Miss Barrow's throat was very dry. The initial disbelief had gone now, and been replaced with a certain knowledge that she was in deep trouble. Johanna Cabal? It seemed evident that they were after Johannes Cabal, and somehow lines of communication had become tangled, and they thought their man was actually a woman. But why her? She wasn't the only woman, and being badgered by some coxcomb in an army uniform wasn't helping. Did she understand these rights? He kept asking. Did she understand? She started to stumble through what might have been an agreement when suddenly Miss Ambersley was between them. She's English! The tiny Miss Ambersley screamed in the lieutenant's face. How dare you suggest such a foul calumny upon the English lady, you foreigner! The lieutenant looked down at the incandescent woman and raised an unbearably superior eyebrow. Ah, signora, here you are the foreigner. There is possibly no insult so calculated to sting the English as the suggestion that they may at any time be considered foreign, as this flies in the face of the obvious truth that the whole of creation actually belongs to the English, and they are just allowing everybody else to camp on bits of it from a national sense of noblesse oblige. If looks could kill, the lieutenant would surely have been turned to gritty dust in an instant, and his entire family tree, dating back several generations, retrospectively stricken from history. Looks, however, do not kill. He remained alive and smug, despite Miss Amberslay's very best efforts. "You vile man," she said slowly, managing to make even "you" sound like a dreadful slur. She pointedly turned her back to him and spoke urgently to Miss Barrow. "You mustn't worry about a thing, my dear," she said, taking Miss Barrow's hands in hers. "This ridiculous toy soldier has obviously made a stupid mistake. I shall go straight to the British consulate and inform them of what has happened. You mustn't worry, please. Help is on its way. Chin up, Miss Barrow. You show 'em, eh?" Leonie Barrow had not much time for the twittering antics of Miss Amberslay on the journey. But there was something very affecting about the little woman's faith in her innocence and her confidence that the truth would out that made a lump grow in Miss Barrow's throat. No matter what, she could be sure of one ally in this ordeal. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Thank you, Miss Amberslay. I shall." "Tch," muttered the lieutenant dismissively. The thrill of doing something out of the ordinary was wearing off. He'd been hoping for a gunfight or a pitched battle against zombies. Two English women being unutterably English with each other was just boring. He gave an order to the sergeant, and Signorina Johanna Cabal, a necromancer of some little infamy, apparently, was escorted off the aeroship and into custody. Herr Johannes Cabal, meanwhile, an actual necromancer of some little infamy and even smaller scruples, was wandering the streets of Perilla and considering his next move. His original plan had been to get out of the town with as much alacrity as he could muster. The reason for such haste was based on the least helpful chain of events that he could hypothesize, to wit that Miss Barrow proclaimed, "I am innocent! That document is a forgery! You're actually looking for Johannes Cabal, who has been masquerading as Gerhard Meisner, a Markarvian civil servant." And the Senzens replied, "So you are! So it is! After him!" And in this dire scenario, the whole town would raise a hue and cry within minutes, and he would be arrested very shortly thereafter. This was an unpleasant hypothesis, and he didn't care to think about it for too long, not least because it was not very likely. The document was not a bad forgery, and would maintain a thread of doubt in the mind of the authorities, no matter how convincing Miss Barrow proclaimed her innocence. They might believe her, but it would be gross incompetence to release her without definite proof of her bona fides. It was, after all, far better to detain an innocent person for a day or so, and then apologize, than to let a necromancer go free. A day or so, then. That was all the leeway he had. Trying to leave town with undue haste would draw attention. So he would spend a little time making life difficult for the pursuers, who would inevitably try and pick up his trail when the authorities wearied of the little joke he had played on them. Miss Barrow also. He had an uncomfortable feeling in his chest that he believed was probably the prickling of a guilty conscience. He was glad to have his soul back, but the whole conscience business that had come with it discommoded. That was all. Good grief, he had shot people for being less of a nuisance than she. She should be grateful. He felt a faint flickering of a resentful anger at her, and this alarmed him too, with its base irrationality. Finally, he drove all such thoughts from his mind by forcefully reminding himself that he was on borrowed time, and that she would soon be free, if rather cross with him, and the hounds would be on his trail. So Cabal made plans. The first thing to do was to draw a line between himself and the discarded Meisner persona. The first part of that was to lose the Markarvian accent he had adopted, Very successfully, it seemed, judging by the fact that not a single native Mercarvian had commented on it. Instead, he would exaggerate what was left of his own Hessen pronunciation and claim to be a tourist from the Germanies. A casual stroll into a bookshop and a perusal of its geography section gave him the details he needed to flesh out his story. He was staying at an inn in Escalti, a small town some 15 kilometers away. He had found the place a little dull, a point intended to play to the locals who maintained a friendly rivalry with Ascalti, and cadged a lift to Perilla with the understanding that he make his own way back. Thus, could you direct me to the Stazione Ferroviaria Perilla, Beta? Of course, he had no intention of going to a provincial little dump like Ascalti. Instead, he would lose himself in a city like Ganin until he could find a way to get across the border. That shouldn't be too difficult, he thought. It was its eastern borders with untrustworthy neighbors like Mercarvia and Catamenia that Senza guarded closely. The west was a different thing altogether. He would also have to undergo a physical transformation, and this he was not looking forward to in the slightest. He would change clothes when he reached the city, but in the meantime he would locate the necessary chemicals to make himself a quantity of impromptu hair dye. He certainly didn't want to just buy the stuff ready-made, a single police inquiry in the right place, and the fact that he was disguising his hair color and the shade used would be known. Far better to make his own. The necessary knowledge to synthesize hair dye from common chemicals was something he had developed some years earlier when it became apparent that it might very well come in handy. To Cabal's mind, it had been worth a few days then and a few hours a year subsequently to brush up on his notes and avoid the possibility of ending up on gallows simply because he looked so very much like himself. His most obvious physical feature, after all, was that he was very blond indeed. Once he changed that, descriptions would lose a lot of their usefulness. He had thus developed a single dye, synthesized from common chemicals, that rendered his hair a convincing brown. Furthermore, the stuff came out again after 4 or 5 washings, using warm water, a strong shampoo, and a lot of white pickling vinegar. It left him smelling like a gherkin, with hair the consistency of straw, but that passed quickly after a further wash in more sympathetic substances. Beer and raw egg worked well. After a visit to the bank to change some of the British notes he had concealed in the lining of his case for cents and liras, "I'm touring," he told the cashier, almost truthfully. He found a dispensing chemist and a very well-stocked hardware shop that between them provided everything he needed for his hair dye. He had no intention of actually making it while in Perilla. The plan was to mix it in the train's lavatory en route to Ganin so that he would step down to the platform a different man. For the moment, he stored his purchases away in his bag and wondered if it would be advisable to buy a change of clothes, too, before traveling. No, the chance of police inquiries revealing the purchases and so updating his description was too great. On the other hand, he could always buy something gaudy and memorable and then dump it at the first opportunity. Should the police discover the purchase, they would certainly regard it as an attempt to radically alter his appearance and therefore report it to their police bulletins, rendering them even more inaccurate. This seemed to Cabal a desirable state of affairs. He was just wandering the streets looking for somewhere that might sell orange ruffled shirts when he paused to look in the shop window. In the reflection, he saw a familiar figure across the avenue behind him, but only a flash, and then it disappeared up an alleyway. Cabal's heart sank. All that paranoia aboard ship had just been mellowing into an acceptance that there weren't armies of agents and masses of interlocking conspiracies at all, and he'd been enjoying being able to forget all that in order to concentrate on simply avoiding the police. As a necromancer, this was very much part of the job requirements, and he flattered himself that he was quite practiced and professional at it. Now, however, all those fears that something terribly complex that killed people in passing was going on, and he had no idea what it was, came back to him with sobering intensity. The man he had seen reflected in the glass was Alexis Aloysius Casson, and he was positive that Casson had been watching him. Cabal turned, but caught just a glimpse of Casson's coat as he scurried up the alley and out of sight. This complicated things. Cabal needed at least another half-hour to complete his arrangements before catching the train. If Casson ran off to find a police officer, Flight would become dramatically more difficult. The railway station would immediately become off-limits, and he could be sure that the main thoroughfares out of Perilla would be watched. There was nothing for it. Cabal would have to take what mealy-mouthed governmental types might call executive action. His term was much shorter and involved sticking his switchblade between Casson's ribs, sighing heavily, for he disliked violence generally, and murder in particular. Cabal set off to commit violent murder. Cabal's earlier walk around this district of Perilla had already formed a reliable map in his well-ordered memory, and he knew that Casson's alley would bring him out into the Viala Grilla, a leafy avenue bounded by closed shops and cafes. He set off at a fast trot down the road he was on, a long, narrow street with an uncommonly high frequency of bookshops upon it, called the Via Forti, to intercept Casson as he emerged from the end of the dog-legged alleyway. At the corner, however, he had reason to come to an abrupt slowing and a grand show of mannered nonchalance. Directly opposite the end of the alleyway, an officer of the Polizia di Cortiere was chatting up a waitress at a roadside cafe. Cabal could only observe and inwardly plan a rapid retreat as he watched Casson emerge from the alley and head directly for the policeman. After he crossed the road and was a mere couple of meters from the cafe, however, he turned to his left and started walking away from Cabal, and, indeed, the policeman. Cabal immediately dropped his plans for flight and watched, perplexed, as Casson wandered off. No, that wasn't accurate. Casson was emphatically not wandering. Rather, he was walking with definite intent up the Via La Grilla in the direction of its junction with the Via Paz. This was all very mysterious. Cabal checked his watch to see how long he had before he had to be at the railway station, but his intent in running was being chipped away by pure curiosity. What on earth did Casson think he was up to? Cabal checked his watch again, but this time it was just to give him a moment to think. He had time to follow Casson for perhaps 5 minutes before completing his purchases and getting to the station become overriding. It probably wouldn't be very difficult to follow him undetected. The sun was almost down, and the pale stone of the buildings was already glowing a darkening blue. Very well, then, he decided. 5 minutes, and no more. Walking like a man enjoying a stroll on the way home from work, Cabal set off after Casson. And that's the end of chapter 11. So now we have a mystery. You okay?
I've been holding that in.
You squeeze.
I've been holding that in for a minute.
I didn't know that you could hold it.
I know. It was a new skill. I've learned something
That you
about
just
myself.
unlocked?
Yes, actually. I also full on started complaining about you on my Instagram story.
Why? What do you have to complain about on your Instagram about me?
That my brother stole my chair just to read bedtime stories.
You have a whole bed there. It's
Yeah, and
not.
I couldn't get on it because it was going to make a squeak. And it was going to interrupt. I would be considerate to you.
What a travesty
I was
that you
being
made a
considerate.
momentary squeak.
Yeah, I was being considerate.
Oh my god.
I also just had to be quiet for like 10, 15 minutes. That's a lot.
For you, yes, I could see how that would be very
I
draining
had a lot of
for
things
you.
I wanted to talk about.
Oh my
You know,
god.
I had a lot of thoughts that went through me.
There we go. Okay, Horst, enlighten us. What do you have to talk about?
So, first of all, there's a store called Build-A-Bear, right?
God, Horst is going to go on a rant about Build-A-Bear. Do you want to take Denky's spot
Sure.
in the rant today? Is that what you want?
Oh, sure.
Oh God, come here and grab this fucking microphone.
Oh, wait, am I getting mic'd?
Yeah, you get the mic. Here
Oh
you
my
go.
god, do I get the chair back?
Yeah, you get to sit in the chair.
Oh
You
my
have to
gosh,
get
I've
up.
missed that
You
chair.
have to get up in a few minutes, though.
I
will be
missed
sitting
that
back in
chair. Wait, where can I put him? Right here? I feel so official.
Wherever you want. It doesn't matter.
I feel so official.
Oh my god. Let's get this over with.
So get this, right? Everyone always talks about Build-A-Bear, how it is like the absolute best place in the world for kids. But here's the thing. I'm pretty sure Johannes may have inspired them from something because I fully believe Build-A-Bear is filled with nothing but necromancers. Because when you're a kid, you don't realize it. You never realize it.
I would never deign to rubber stamp Build-A-Bear.
Okay, all I'm saying is that there was an opportunity, and I'm not going to put you against taking it. So whenever you go to Build-A-Bear as a kid, you don't think about it.
I would exactly encourage, but...
This is my time.
Okay, fine.
When you go into Build-A-Bear as a kid, the first thing you do is you get a dead animal's skin. Let's just let that be known. We're talking in adult terms here. Yeah, you can build the undead there. You take a dead animal's skin, you have to go get its organs pushed back into it, and then you have workers that are just supporting the idea of having a whole entire ritual of bringing it back to life, getting its heart to start beating. You basically have to punch a heart. That's all I'm saying. You were there the last time, you know what I'm talking about. And then after that, you have to do this entire magical rendition. You have to say some spells. And then suddenly your friend's alive. You have to put his vocal cords back. All I'm saying is that's necromancy. Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I talk now?
Yeah, you can talk.
Is it not your time?
Yeah, no, I need you to understand that this is yeah, they all agree.
A lot of this is what we would term insider baseball. Your lack of knowledge is startling.
But am I wrong?
Considering how much time you've spent with me.
Build-A-Bear is full of sorcery and violence. Best fiends are made there.
I doubt the pretense is to encourage small children.
Yeah, necromancy 101 for kids.
Don't encourage them.
All I'm saying is don't trust anyone that's been to Build-A-Bear more than 5 times. I've been there 10, and look at me.
Yes, everyone look at the monster. Oh my god. And yet I'm the necromancer. But you want to claim... Never mind. Fine.
No, continue that thought. I would love to hear it.
You've been there 10 times to look at you, implying that you've become something abominable. Which you have, but in the wrong field.
Dead men do tell tales. Thanks, folks. And once again, welcome back.
Too bright. Everything's fine and we're back. So, where were we? Horst isn't allowed to talk anymore. Nothing happened. Don't worry about it, everything is fine. I told him not to bring up anything that he couldn't put back down, and he couldn't follow instructions. It's fine. We're all fine. Where were we? Chapter 12? Right. I'd advise you not to worry about it. We're fine. I'll take care of it later. Sorry for that minor detour, everyone. Just going to keep... It's okay. I have multiple weapons on hand. The incident will not repeat itself. Hopefully, You all are still well? I'm having an evening of sorts. Are we all back? Are we all here? Oh, no reason to be concerned. Everything's handled now. I will have to clean this shirt. I do still have some water. Luckily, it didn't spill in the upset. We're back. Well, when I say it's handled, you can rest assured that the problem is then 6 feet under afterwards. Trust me, we're fine. The incident will not repeat itself. Are we all ready for chapter 12? We're all good. Hopefully your concerns have been addressed. Although, I can't stay too much longer, so we're going to have to cut along with a little bit more alacrity. Unfortunately, there are matters that need to be addressed later, but we'll get to that. Right now, everything is handled. Chapter 12, in which the gloves come off. Casson was evidently not in the mood for window shopping. He walked up the Via Grilla like a man with a mission, moving from the right-hand side of the avenue back over to the left as he reached the junction with the Via Pass. Cabal had no trouble shadowing him. He had no interest at all in watching his own back, his attention being focused entirely on his forward quarter. Cabal watched him vanish around the corner, then dog-trotted in pursuit, in a semi-casual, if I'm late home for dinner again, my wife will kill me sort of way. He still took the corner cautiously himself. He had half an idea that Casson really was a Mercarvian agent after all, and might be waiting in ambush, but this proved fallacious. Casson was already 50 meters away on the curbside of the pavement, walking at a fast pace, and sometimes craning his head to the right, as if looking for somebody or something who was just obscured by the line of buildings, curiouser and curiouser. Opposite the church of the San Giovanni de Carlaro was the western end of the Via Vortis, where Cabal had first espied Casson, and it was onto this road that Casson turned. Cabal followed to the corner and looked around it more than a little suspiciously. The only reason he could imagine anybody walking so fixedly around the same buildings was if to see he was being pursued. That would depend on Casson actually checking his back, but he never did. An alternative occurred to Cabal. Perhaps Casson was shadowing somebody else. But, in that case, whoever this third member of the chain was, why was he circling the buildings too? Perhaps Cabal was doing the wrong thing. Perhaps instead of following Casson widdershins around the triangle of buildings until boredom set in or shoe leather gave out, he should reverse his path and discover of whom it was that Casson was in such single-minded pursuit. No, he realized after a brief second, that was a bad idea, as it would mean walking straight into the unknown prey, if prey he was, and not hunted predator. Instead, he would wait in ambush. Casson had already passed the end of the alleyway he had originally used between the Via Vortis and the Via Agrilla, apparently intending to go at least as far as the junction where the two met, on the edge of the Piazza Bior. That was good enough for Cabal. He would wait in the alleyway, working on the hypothesis that the third man would circle the route at least once more. Dusk was gathering rapidly, for which he was grateful, as it allowed him to lurk with an excellent chance of going unseen. He found a dark corner between a drain pipe and a barrel half full of food wrappers, and was just turning to see how good a view of the Via Vortis it afforded, when he received a resounding slap across the face that snapped his head to one side and sent his dark spectacles flying. In the moment between impact and tilting his head back to glare at his attacker, he realized two things. First, the dusk wasn't quite as gloomy as it had seemed from behind smoked glasses, and second, Leonid Barrow had gotten out of custody with remarkable alacrity. "Guten Abend, Fräulein Barrow," he said, watching her guardedly as he recovered his spectacles. It was obviously becoming too dark to wear them, so he slid them into his breast pocket instead. "How pleasant to see you." Miss Leonie Barrow, for her part, called him something utterly frightful, and that she had never said or called anybody in her life before, and that even her father, career policeman that he had been, had only ever heard a handful of times, and then kicked Cabal hard on the shin. Cabal was a great fan of dignity in general, and of his own in particular, and managed to keep the hopping down to 2 low springs before overcoming the sharp and penetrating pain. "How bloody dare you? How could you? I gave you a chance, and this is how you repay me?" she shouted at him. "I could have handed you right over there, right on the first night, as soon as I saw your pasty, smug face in the salon. I must have been demented not to. I need my bloody head examined." Cabal wasn't giving her his full consideration. He was mindful that the mysterious third man might be walking past on the Via Vortis in front of him, and that at the end of the alley behind him on the Via La Grilla there was a police constable who, if he could tear his attention away from the waitress at the cafe, might wonder what all the commotion down the alley was about. Cabal had an ugly intimation that Miss Barrow would tell him, too. She needed to be quiet. He needed her to be quiet, and to be so quickly. To his small credit, he considered stabbing her and dumping her body in the barrel for no more than a few seconds, although he did get as far as targeting her solar plexus for the fatal incision, followed by angling the blade upwards to penetrate the diaphragm and the aorta, and gripping the knife in his pocket before dissuading himself. Instead, he put his left hand over her mouth and forced her against the wall. The suddenness of the move shocked her into compliance, her only reaction being an alarmed widening of the eyes. He locked his gaze to hers, raised his right index finger to his lips, and whispered with harsh impressiveness, "Shh!" Miss Barrow bit his palm. He snatched it from her mouth with a muffled curse that hadn't been sounded since the destruction of a pre-human species, much given to foul utterances that surpassed even man's aptitude for filthy imagery. Even to his long-vanished race, however, what Cabal said would have been considered a bit naughty. He almost backhanded her, but with a tremendous force of will, reining in a burning desire to create pain, he prevented himself. Instead, he stood glaring at her, hand raised. She flinched a little, but only a little. Finally, shaking with suppressed violence, he lowered his gloved hand and examined the palm. "You've left teeth marks on the leather," he said, for lack of anything more civil to say. She started to say something, but he raised a finger to her lips. "Before you utter another syllable, ask yourself 2 questions. First, what would you have done in my place? And second, what am I doing hiding up an alleyway anyway? And no, it wasn't to get away from you, as should be both evident by my surprise at your liberty and the fact that you found me so easily." "I wish I'd told the captain about you." If wishes counted for anything, neither of us would be in our current situations, Miss Barrow. You concede that I had no choice, however. No. Close enough. Which brings us to my second question. If you would care to join me behind this barrel, I will explain. Behind the barrel? Now, she was no longer looking at him as if he were the very epitome of evil, but just rather mad. "Yes, with some urgency, please. Time is short." "You're not going to stab me, are you?" she asked, mindful of the knife he'd used to defend himself when he was attacked aboard the Princess Hortense. "I was, but it would have been impolite. Believe me, if I was going to kill you, you would already have breathed your last, instead of using said breath to yak tediously at me. Behind the barrel, please, now." Shaken by Cabal's admission that murdering her had crossed his mind, but had been dispensed with for logical rather than for moral or compassionate reasons, she allowed herself to be steered into hiding, from a cautious crouch that surveyed the Via Vortis in the darkening twilight. After a minute of boiling resentment slowly reducing to a simmer, Miss Barrow asked, "What are we waiting for?" "Not what," answered Cabal in a whisper. "Who?" Miss Barrow analyzed his reply in silence for a moment, found it lacking, and asked, "Very well, then. For whom are we waiting?" "I don't know. Let's wait and find out, shall we?" If he was aware of the filthy look that Miss Barrow gave him, he did nothing to indicate it. So, she said with indignant sarcasm, we are hiding behind a barrel in a town that I believe neither of us has ever visited before, waiting for somebody that you don't know. From behind a barrel. I think the barrel aspect of this situation bears repeating. Cabal considering saying that if she would prefer to be dead as a doornail and head down in the barrel, it still wasn't too late for him to organize that for her, but he did not. Instead, he kept his attention on their view of the road and waited for somebody indefinitely suspicious to walk by. Unfortunately, to Cabal's finely honed sense of paranoia, everybody looked suspicious. That one is hanging around, he whispered, to which Miss Barrow replied, he's sweeping the street. That one is an obvious agent, he whispered, to which Miss Barrow replied, he's a blind man, selling matches, pencils, and shoelaces. That's what he wants you to think. He's doing a brilliant job in that case. Look, he's moving on. She slapped Cabal's shoulder. I don't even know what I'm doing here. I should be pressing charges against you, not waiting for God only knows who in some back alley in Perilla, behind a barrel. I'm mad. I must be. After all you've done, I must be mad. Not even after all you've done in general, but just after what you've done to me today. She looked at Cabal, bewildered by herself. Why am I doing this? Simplicity itself. First, my ruse with the falsified bulletin must have been rapidly seen through. No, she said, shaking her head wearily. You're too good a forger, it seems. Oh, a slow smile of wry amusement appeared on his face. Why, Miss Barrow, are you a fugitive? No. Nothing so they checked their files and couldn't find a Johanna Cabal, only a Johannes. So they decided there was no conspiracy, just a bureaucratic cock-up somewhere along the line. They're a very pragmatic bunch. The lieutenant who arrested me, gave me his personal apology. Then he asked me out to dinner. Cabal grunted under his breath. Most pragmatic. He was busily kissing my hand when Miss Ambersley turned up with half the British consulate in tow. Things were explained, and they asked if I wanted to make a formal complaint. Did you? Well, no, she seemed a little embarrassed. It seemed a bit rude, what with him kissing my hand and everything. And everything? He echoed with disdain. She shot him a dirty look. You like to pretend you're some sort of pure scientist without a human feeling in your body, but you're just a horrid little man, really, aren't you, Cabal? Cabal had no answer, or at least no answer that he cared to make, so they crouched in silence for a minute longer. Cabal checked his watch. I may have miscalculated, he said. We should have seen him coming by now. In fact, he looked up at the road as he replaced his pocket watch. We should have seen Casson by now. Casson? From the aeroship? I thought you said you didn't know who you were waiting for. I wasn't waiting for Casson. I was waiting for the man Casson was following. Who's that? Miss Barrow was growing more confused by the second. I don't know. I thought I'd explain that. You haven't explained anything. This is the first I've heard that Casson was somehow mixed up in all this. Why is Casson following somebody anyway? I don't know, said Cabal testily. That's why I was waiting for him to pass by. I don't understand any of this. Nor do I. Do you think I hide behind barrels and shadowy alleyways for fun? No, I don't, he said to head off Miss Barrow, who he felt sure was about to say something that it didn't surprise her at all. There's something going on, and it has to do with the murders. Probable murder and suicide, you mean? Oh, please. Cabal was splendidly dismissive. Daguerre is murdered for some reason. Then why the suicide story falls flat is Zurich is incriminated. The killer makes a harsh job of it and eliminates Zurich before the shortcomings in the charade can be exposed, not realizing that it's too late. Lady Nineka's alibi for him, you mean? Said Miss Barrow. Exactly so. I have an inkling how Daguerre was dealt with, but killing Zorik is a different matter. The more that I think on the matter, the more solid Sten's ridiculous concept of a League of Assassins becomes. That makes me think of magicians and their stage illusions, you know. They pull off half their stuff because they're prepared to do the most credible feats of engineering far beyond what the audience thinks is reasonable for a small effect. Just because something seems ridiculous doesn't mean it isn't true. Cabal considered her words and said, "You have a very good point, and one that undermines the basis of much of my logic to date. I told Sten that he was a fool, though not in so many words, because this conspiracy of shadows flew into the face of Occam's razor when given the choice between a simple explanation and a complex one. The simpler is usually the truth. That's why I believed in Zorik's suicide for an unconscionably long time. I've been an idiot, though. Usually is a long way indeed from always. As with the whole Johannes Cabal nonsense, you may hate me for it now, but you will dine out on it for a year, I assure you. They preferred to believe in incompetence rather than in a forged document, but the document was forged." He looked at her seriously. "And there are conspiracies out there. I've stood too close to several to deny their existence. And a hotbed of intrigue with little states so small that you can drop a penny and it will roll over half a dozen international borders before coming to a halt, and where everyone hates their neighbors, plots and conspiracies are endemic." Leonie Barrow looked at him with a strange expression, her pale skin blue and shadowed by the failing light, her eyes dark and bottomless. "Cabal?" she whispered. "Yes." "How?" She paused, searching for the words. Her gaze fell and then rose again, and she looked deep into his eyes. "How did you ever become so very fucked up?" Cabal sighed. He knew it wasn't even intended as an insult. It didn't matter. He had no answer. He looked back out onto the street. "Casson's gone," he said, rising from his crouch. "He didn't come back around this way again. You can stop hiding down there, unless you've developed a taste for it, of course." She had not, and rose, patting the dust off her skirt. "If anybody sees me coming out of a side street with you, and I'm even a bit disheveled, I swear I will never live it down." "Nor I," said Cabal offhandedly. "I wonder where he went. Let's see if we can find him." He walked out onto the Via Vortis and looked both ways. There was no sign of Herr Casson. Miss Barrow joined him, albeit in a poor temper. "Why? He's just an odd little man. Why are you so interested in him?" "You didn't see him. He was like a man on a mission." He started walking, and Miss Barrow had to scuttle a little to catch up. "Not the sort of man I would normally associate with missions. Would you? He was behaving curiously, and since recent events render that which is curious suspicious, I want to know what he was up to." "Oh, come on," she said, and laughed disbelievingly. "Are you telling me that you suspect a pug in a bad suit like Casson of crawling around the ship's fence and trying to throw you to your doom? You're kidding me." "I am kidding nobody," he said icily, then reconsidered. "Well, apart from everybody who thinks I'm a Mercarvian civil servant named Gerhard Meisner, obviously, then I am kidding. In this case, however, I am sincere. I do not believe he attacked me, true, but I suspect he may know who did." "Based on what?" "Masculine intuition?" "Based," said Cabal, beginning to chafe under all the unwarranted sarcasm, "upon the weight of probabilities." They had, by this point, reached the Piazza Bior with no sign of Casson. Cabal looked up at the Via Agrilla and frowned when he remembered the policeman at the cafe. He turned to Miss Barrow and, with evident reluctance, offered her his arm. She regarded it with equally evident suspicion. "What's this?" Cabal forbore to state the obvious and said, "It would help us go unnoticed if we look like people who can actually bear to be in each other's company." "I'm not a good enough actress for that, Cabal. I'm not asking you to look as if you dote upon my every word and glow with happiness in my mere presence." "Well, that's lucky. I just need you to look as if you don't loathe me. I'm really not a good enough actress for that. Why the sudden concern? There's a cafe up there where there is a police officer busily derelicting his duty. Hold on. There's no such verb as to derelict. There is now. Would you kindly stop interrupting? There's a police officer, and I do not wish to arouse his suspicions, should he have eyes for anything other than the waitress, which I doubt. Therefore, it would help if we were to avoid an obvious show of animosity. Will you take my arm? Miss Barrow looked up the avenue, thinking. Then she smiled at Cabal and offered her arm. I should be delighted, Mr. Cabal. Cabal took her arm, and they processed toward the cafe like old friends. Or at least the sort of old friends in which the lady wears a somewhat smug smile while the gentleman scowls darkly. Cabal wasn't sure why he had suddenly consented to walk arm in arm with him, but he took it to be some sort of arch-feminine insult that he did not understand, nor did he care to try to understand. It was only when they were less than 10 meters from the police officer that he realized how remarkably stupid he had been, so focused on looking for Cassant that he had regarded the policeman as nothing more than a trifling inconvenience that he could guard against by using Miss Barrow. Only now did he remember that using Miss Barrow in any ploy that involved being within calling for help range of an officer of the law while he stood right next to her was akin to searching for a gas leak with a flamethrower. He thought he understood her well enough to conclude that she would be more interested in Cassant's activities than in just handing him over to the police, but that said, he had framed her as a necromancer and set the military on her, and she might be a tad upset still. In any event, it was far too late to punch her and run. Instead, he had to touch his hat, smile as convincingly as he could, and say, "Guten Abend, officer," as the policeman noticed that he had company. The policeman's attention rested on him so briefly that Cabal didn't know whether to be relieved or mortally insulted. He could have been wearing one of a more fetching wanted posters published in his wake. He kept a collection, his favorite being the one with the decent woodcut, the correct punctuation, and a tiny bit of egotism here, the eye-wateringly large bounty on his head. On a piece of string around his neck, and the officer would not have noticed. Instead, Cabal watched as the officer's attention slid effortlessly across him like mercury in a pan to settle on Leonie Barrow. "Buonasera, signorina," he said, failing to acknowledge Cabal altogether. If he had applied the same observational skills to crime scenes and suspects as he did to ascertaining Miss Barrow's marital status, he would have made a Capa della Polizia before he was 30. As it was, that seemed unlikely. At this precise moment, for example, he was far less interested in Cabal's awkward body language and rictus-like smile than in whether women were more interesting when they were dark and passionate, like the waitress, or pale and interesting, like the beautiful lady out walking with the undertaker, or clerk, or whatever he was. Miss Barrow barely looked at him. "Good evening, Constable," she said, and walked on. Cabal gave her a sideways glance that she pointedly failed to acknowledge. A few paces on, an argument broke out between the policeman and the waitress. When they were safely past the cafe, Cabal said, "I am unsure whether to thank you or demand an explanation." Miss Barrow walked several paces before replying. "The former, I hope, as I'm not sure why I didn't just grass you up like the scum you are." "That's uncanny. Are you channeling your father at the moment?" Miss Barrow raised a hand in admonition. "Please, Cabal, please don't mention my dad, or I'll feel guilty that I didn't just do the right thing and stitch you up like a kipper." She put her hand to her mouth. "Even my dad doesn't talk like that. He would have understood not giving you up to the Mercarvians," she continued, otherwise unabashed. "He's not a great fan of capital punishment, but he'd never understand why I didn't just hand you over to Constable Don Juan back there." "No," said Cabal, remembering the implacable Frank Barrow. "I don't think he would. Don't get any bright ideas that I didn't do it because I think you're anything other than the monster you are, Cabal. Under different circumstances, you'd be under arrest right now. But..." She stopped, and Cabal stopped too. She looked up at him, frowning, slightly and serious. "There's something going on. Something wrong. Something terribly, terribly wrong. Something wicked and cruel that ate Daguerre and Zorik and would have killed you too if it had its way. It's worse than you, Cabal. I've understood you better than I ever wanted to, and part of that is knowing that you don't go looking for trouble. It just seeks you out. But that's something else. Whoever or whatever is behind what has happened over the past couple of days makes trouble. The kind of trouble that makes corpses, and I think it's only just beginning. I want to stop it before it leaves anybody else dead. And how do I fit into this monster hunt of yours? She smirked, but there was a little humor in it. Set a monster to catch a monster, Cabal. She took his arm and started walking again. Cabal allowed himself to be drawn along, his mind distracted and distant. By the time they reached the end of the avenue, night had truly fallen. A lamplighter was busily hurrying along, lighting the gas lamps as he went, clearly behind schedule. They stepped aside to let him trot past and turned into the Via Pace. There was almost nobody about it, being the hour of the evening meal. Where from here? Asked Miss Barrow as they passed into the shadow of the San Giovanni de Collado. Cabal gestured loosely across the road at the end of the Via Vorti. We go up there, as far as the alleyway where you spotted me, and then we give it up as hopeless. Casson, or at least whoever he was following, obviously, stopped pacing around this triangle of the town, and the pair of them are long gone. After that, he checked his watch and swore mildly. I don't know. I was intending to leave town, but I've missed my train. I assume that if I attempt it in the morning without your permission, the police will be watching the stations along all routes from here just as soon as you can warn them. You assume correctly. I think you're right about Casson. We'll try the Princess Hortense, I think. He's probably there. She took a step, but was pulled up short by her arm being linked with Cabal's. He wasn't moving at all. She looked at him curiously. He was staring off into the middle distance, his nostrils flared, hardly moving. After a moment, he relaxed a little and felt her gaze. He glanced at her, apparently embarrassed. What is it? She asked. I don't want you to make any frivolous comments. You obviously enjoy calling me a monster, and I'm not inclined to give you any more ammunition. However, he flared his nostrils again and inhaled. However, I can smell blood. She looked at him in astonishment for a moment and then sniffed experimentally. Perhaps it was just his words playing on her imagination, but she thought she could sense something warm and metallic on the warm evening air. Oh, God. I think you're right. Where's it coming from? Cabal looked around, questing. I think it's coming from... actually... You're standing in it. To her credit, Miss Barrow reacted in no more melodramatic a fashion than stepping back to study the dark wet patch that formed between the cobbles at the end of a small, shadowed pathway that led down beside the church before joining the road. It looked black and oily under the yellow glow of the warming gaslight mantles high atop their lampposts. That's a lot of blood, she said with more detachment than Cabal would have expected. Not necessarily. A little blood goes a long way, he replied a bit ruefully, the voice of experience. For her answer, she daintily dipped the toe of her shoe into the patch. It went in quite a way. It seemed that the patch was just the surface of a deep pool that had formed where a cobble was missing. That's a lot of blood, she repeated, and Cabal couldn't argue with that. It had to be the best part of a leader, and people tend to get very distressed when they find themselves missing such a large portion of their vital bodily fluids, that or dead. There's a trail, he said. There was, indeed, a trail, but not one made up of drops. The pool had formed by blood running down the pathway for a meter or so, but shortly beyond that there was a broad, smeared trail of the stuff. It didn't take a great forensic talent to realize that whoever was bleeding had collapsed and dragged himself away further up the path. Odd, if I were badly wounded right next to a thoroughfare, it would head towards it to try and get help. Admittedly, it's quiet at the moment, but it's still the best choice. Would you be thinking that straight if you were so hurt? Miss Barrow was walking slowly up the path, following the trail. Cabal didn't know. He also didn't know if they should be getting involved. This has nothing to do with us. We should go. No, there's somebody terribly injured. They need help. Help? How much? Look how much blood is there, woman. They're dead, so I repeat, we should go. She stopped and turned to look at him. In the darkness, he couldn't make out her expression, but her stillness unnerved him strangely. When she spoke, the tone was tired and dismissive, but he thought he heard something else there that he couldn't quite justify, perhaps quite identify. Perhaps it was disgust or disappointment. Go, then, Cabal. Just chew. I'm done with you. She turned her back on him and continued to follow the trail of blood. He watched her while he failed to do anything. He failed to come up with a witty retort. He failed to say anything very profound regarding their unusual relationship. He failed to walk away with dignity. He succeeded only in opening his mouth and closing it again, undecided, and as her back was to him, she didn't even see that. He was still standing there, impassively, 30 seconds later, when she became tired at being stared at. In that time, she hadn't progressed very far, the blood becoming increasingly difficult to see in the shadows. Just bugger off, will you, Cabal? You're in my light. If you aren't going to... The groan that shuddered out of the darkness made her spin around with a small yelp of surprise. It was a barely human sound, deep and miserable, but Cabal, who had far too much experience in such things, realized that it definitely was human. It seemed that he had been wrong to believe that the donor of the blood on the cobblestones was dead, although by the sound of it, that error would be moot in a few minutes. Checking that his knife was easily accessible in his jacket pocket, he followed Miss Barrow as she walked as quickly as she dared into the shadows. A few paces on, she paused. It wasn't far away, she whispered, ready to be quiet immediately she heard anything else. There's a side door here. Cabal heard a handle being tried. It's locked. He stood beside her. The shape of the doorframe was just visible in the shadows. Further along the wall, beside it was a narrow, locked and shuttered window. Are you sure this is where that groan came from? He asked, whispering too. Must be. She squinted into the darkness beyond them. I don't think there's anywhere else it could have come from. It just looks like blank walls after this house. She tapped experimentally at the ground past the door and then turned back to him, all business. The cobblestones seem tacky past the door. I think the trail stops here. We need to get in somehow. Can you pick locks? No, said Cabal shortly, and kicked the door open. He stepped through and stood in the dark while checking his pockets. Miss Barrow heard a rattle, and suddenly a match flared in Cabal's hand. He quickly held the match away from himself to save his eyes from the sudden light, and shielded it further with his free hand. In the reflected glow from the walls, they saw that the door opened into a narrow hallway. At the end, a staircase ascended a few steps onto a landing before turning to the left. In the unsteady light, there seemed to be a widening in the hallway just before the stairs, and the hint of another door leading further back into the house. To the right was a small dresser with a tray on which he sat a candle and a holder. Finally, a door stood half open in the wall to their left. Cabal glanced down. The blood trail angled beneath his feet and through the door. A single smeared, bloody handprint showed on the whitewashed plaster by the base of the frame. He took a moment to light the candle and lifted it. He stood before the half-open door and favored Miss Barrow with a sideways glance in which only a grim necessity was decipherable. Then he turned his attention back to the door. With the fingertips of his gloved left hand, he gently pushed it open. And that was chapter 12. Well, that's good, because we're done anyway. So you technically didn't miss it because it ended right when you did. So, yep. Perfect timing, in fact. Bye, Finn. Yup. Dead, almost dead, same difference, really. Lucy is asleep. Excellent. I put the cat to sleep. We won't get much in any regard anyway. I do have to go here soon. Unfortunately so. I feel very privileged by that. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And I also have a cup of water over here in case I need it. Oh, no, it won't. I've eaten. I ate right before this live started. I will have to check that sometime soon. I also have to, heads up, the live from last week has not been uploaded yet. TikTok keeps saying it's not downloading. It is downloading. It's just corrupting the last tail end of it. So I've been struggling with it. But I'm hoping I can fix that here soon. And now, I guess this one will just be cut together. I'll just upload them together. Or I'll upload part 1 and then part 2. So sorry we had to take there was an incident. Don't push yourself to eat if you aren't terribly hungry, but I dare say if you haven't eaten anything today at all, at least try. Just enough to tide you over it, it'll be fine. Enough to say you ate something. You're grilling? Really? Ah, that sounds awesome. I gotta check it. I gotta check it today. I didn't really get a whole lot of chances this week to be online or just exist online a whole lot. I've been terribly busy this week. Oh, Horst is gone. Oh. Are they in the chat? He might be. That would make sense. I kicked him out. Good job, Swiftblood. You're in charge. Whip all those demons into shape. Yeah, he's been banished to the other room. I banished him. Look, if you can't follow instructions... In any case, I can't leave him alone for too long. He doesn't know what to do on his own, so I will have to go here soon. Fools no one. It's especially good we never need him to go incognito for any reason whatsoever. Can you hear that? Wow, this mic really is good. Yeah, he's banished to the other room. He's not allowed in here right now. Good God. He is loud. I knew it wasn't just me saying he was loud and obnoxious. He truly is. The mic picks it up. I fucking knew it. See, I knew I wasn't exaggerating. He says, I'm melodramatic. Not true. That's not true. It hasn't picked up Taylor at all, and I can hear. That's a strong phrase. Truly. Yeah, the realm of the banished is just the living room. He caused the problems in the first place, and our live got cut short, and I had to deal with that. So now he has to sit in the next room, and he's not allowed to talk about unmentionables. We're no longer acknowledging the existence of I'm not calling it. We can't call it by its name. We're calling it something else. The incident. Yes, it's an incident. It's unfortunate. We're not acknowledging it. Oh. Also, my phone battery is dying. So that's another issue. Also, I left Horst in there with a bunch of food, and, well, he can't eat any of it. Oh, yes, Alice is in here. Oh. I don't know if you'll be able to get it. Seems very comfortable where she's at. Although, if you can get under there. Anyway, I will have to leave here shortly. Okay, you're banished.
I want my cat.
Yeah.
Allison?
Look, not interested. There we go. Go on.
Hello, princess. I've been thinking about you for 30 minutes. Where have you been?
It hasn't been quite that long. Okay, now get out. You're both banished. Leave.
Alice, I'm so sorry your father doesn't love you anymore.
Leave.
Ow!
The breach has been contained.
Okay, Alice, I love you.
So dramatic. But at least I didn't leave him there with any weapons. He just has food. And now a cat. So, all the weapons are in here with me. Where they belong. Oh, Lady Eve is gone? What's the point of even staying here? No. Bye, Lady Eva. No, but unfortunately I will have to go. I do not have a sufficient charger. I don't know. Are you going to give me a percentage? Was that a question? Or was that supposed to be an N? Yeah, but Alice is very reticent to do anything on the behalf of anyone who requests anything of her. So even if you would have to act as though you don't want her to become a weapon, and then that would prove minorly useful, I suppose. Thank you for the rose. But you would have to pretend as though that is the last thing that you do want in order for her to fulfill that. So really, it's an unreliable weapon at best. And the gun works better. Just gonna throw that out there. Yeah, you would really have to try on the cat. And the likelihood of it working, even. I mean, anything could happen. She could just be unduly tired that day, and it wouldn't work. And then your plan is foiled. By the way, if you haven't sent me your plan for cats yet, you can do so in the place where we discuss things. Redacted. And I'm going to go ahead and try and get last week's put up as well as this week's. Hopefully it goes a little bit smoother for me this week, but they will be on the YouTube. If you don't know where the YouTube is, it's in the link in the TikTok bio. If you've never heard me mention it before and have no idea what you're doing here, and you've just waltzed in at the end of a live, we've been reading a book. You can find all of it on YouTube. We're in the second one. There's 5 books total, so you've just walked in on book 2. What's your life like? Anyway, you can find everything you missed on the YouTube, or you can just buy the book. That would probably be a better option for you. Although I have been told that I do have a great ability to put people to sleep. It's probably my one true skill in life, so you're welcome to revisit the YouTube if you'd like. We meet every week at 8 p.m. Central Time, and, well, I like to think we have a good time, but really, that's up for interpretation. If you like people reading to you, you might like it. If you, like people going on random tangents for no good reason, you can stop in about halfway through and listen to someone rant about something, preferably that doesn't end in unfortunate violence. But there are several reasons why you might choose to appear. Once again, this is not Bungo Stray Dogs, but, you know, hopefully you'll get over your disappointment for the rest of us. And that's the end of that disclosure. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead. Yes, I'm gonna go ahead and see myself out. Okay, that's a more reassuring noise than the first one. I don't know if the mic picked that up. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get off here, make sure Horst hasn't fucked anything up drastically, and I will see you all again next week.